Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. I hope that you all are well. I'm recording this video um, um, prior to the Super Bowl being played. And so you all will see this video on Tuesday, February 9th, which will be 2 days after the Super Bowl is played. So let's just hope that future Bryce, the day that you're watching this video, is in a good, favorable, joyous mood from what has occurred on Sunday, which was hopefully, knock on wood, got lots of wood around me here, the chair, the desk. So let's just hope that the Chiefs do some good things on Sunday, which is a fair enough segue to reference the topic for today, which is beer. Okay, so as you can see in the syllabus, today we're taking the transition, and you can see that I have excuse me. You can see that I have in the syllabus the big three, and the big three here, right, are beer, wine, and spirits. And in particular, when I think about beer, how I like to start this conversation is like, well, what's unique about beer? Okay, full stop question. What is unique about beer? Like, what is it about the substance itself, the effects of the substance, how we've come to understand beer socially, culturally, religiously? Like, what are some of the unique aspects that beer presents us in the kind of cornucopia of booze, right? And we can go back to our definition from 2 weeks ago that beer, most simply is an alcoholic drink made from yeast fermented malt flavored with hops, right? And we had that video a couple of weeks back as well, from, I forget what it was called, the Science Channel or something like that, that went through, beer making, the fermentation process, the brewing process. Even just last week in the videos, we talked about Weihenstephan Brewery, right? Which is the longest continuously operating brewery since 1000 AD, essentially. And that brewery starting with and stemming from monks, right? So with that, and kind of like putting some of these pieces together, what's unique about beer? Okay? What's unique about beer? I'm going to give you a second to kind of just like start to like formulate some of those thoughts and some of those maybe answers here. And even like when we have this question of like, well, what's unique about beer? We can also ask the question, well, how have we been conditioned to think about beer, right? Maybe your mom or dad had a beer every day when they got home from work. Maybe you've noticed that more men drink beer than women, or it seems more appropriate for men to drink beer than women to drink beer. Or perhaps, when you go camping, right? Or when you go hunting, when you go on a boat. Anytime that I feel like you're on a boat, especially in the summer, there's probably a beer around or back at the dock or something like that, right? Why? That's the question that I'm interested in exploring. Why? Okay? Like, what is it about beer that is unique, especially compared to wine, compared to spirits? Okay? And so we start to think about this, and we start to think about like the expectations culturally, socially, religiously even. We think about, beer being served as kind of like a more kind of active alcohol. And what I mean by that is a couple of semesters ago, I had a student kind of in this conversation bring up the fact that after 5K races, after, if you participate in that or you have any sort of familiarity with that world, after like a 5K race or a 10K race, sometimes there's always like a beer tent or a beer garden, or how is it and why is it that at concerts there's sometimes like a beer tent? Excuse me. Like very rarely is there like a wine tent or a vodka tent at 5K races or at concerts. Yeah, you can get cocktails, you can probably get wine. But there does seem to be a special reservation a special reservation as it relates to, like, this is a beer event, right? Or beer has its own presence, independent of like what's going on, right? And again, I think that we have to examine like why that's the case. You know, why is it the case that we see so many beer commercials? Why is it the case that like beer has such a high volume, a high presence in the market? There are 2 restaurants in Moscow, right? The Ale House and Tapped, predominantly focusing on carrying beer, right? They also carry other things, wine, and then the Ale House does have spirits. But again, in the name itself, right? Ale House, right? Tapped, tapping a keg, right? And then we do have a handful of local breweries as well in Moscow, okay? And so we have to think about like the culture that surrounds beer. We have to think about why there's a culture that surrounds beer in the way that it does. And then thinking about like what beer does as it relates to taste, what beer does as it relates to and how it's made, right? The carbonation, the fermentation. Some people really liking hoppy beers. Some people really liking non-hoppy beers. Dark beers, light beers, right? The whole gamut of the conversation here, okay? And so just to kind of like get us generated, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let those thoughts sit for a second. I hope that, again, one of my aims, especially today, is for you all just to kind of, again, think a little more deeply as it relates to like why beer? What is it about beer as opposed to, again, wine or spirits, even opposed to other drinks, right? Beer as opposed to hard seltzers. Like what is it about beer that takes up such a special place and a unique place in this spectrum of alcohols? So I'll leave you to think with that next video in just a moment.